And once again, Cloud Foundry After Dark. What's the new stuff? What's the new stuff? What's the gravity of the situation?
What's the talent gravity?
The inevitability.
Yeah, inevitability is feeling good this week. I'm only concerned about one thing, is I got an alarming number of emails about Cloud Foundry After Dark content, and I'm a little worried that more than 3 people are now watching this, so it's going to ruin a little bit of our fun. But
Does that mean more secrets or less secrets?
I think the secrets are my favorite part, so we'll keep those coming. We've got a special guest, and Duncan and Alex from CloudSoft that are cheating on IBM. They're at the IBM conference right now, but they snuck into a room to talk to us on After Dark, talk a little bit about what we did together this week. So I'd like to pass them the mic, and then Mike D's here going to talk a little bit about .NET. He's the guy with the stylish hat. Wave, Mike.
Thanks, James.
I thought that was going to be a Beastie Boys reference, but you meant literally.
No, actually, Mike D from New York, but on Cloud Foundry Engineering.
Confusing, I know.
Duncan, you want to tell us what we've been up to?
Sure, of course. Yeah, I'd be delighted to. Yeah, so basically this week we dropped in to see James and the guys to talk about some integration work we've been doing between Cloud Foundry and Apache Brooklyn. I have with me Alex Henneveld, who can actually walk you through some of the actual technical detail. But essentially, the way we wanted to approach this was to allow people through a single service broker to access the whole sort of cornucopia of blueprints that Apache Brooklyn can stand up. So behind the scenes, you have access now to a wide range of blueprints for a number of fairly substantial production grade platforms and services. And the whole goal was to make those available to the developer community. So, one service broker to rule them all was our sort of approach. And then the flip side was, rather than just consuming what Brooklyn is exposing, is to also give your guys through a plugin the ability to then actually, push out their own blueprints and actually create new services on the fly. So it's really about a two-way street. Now, as you know, we posted a couple of blog posts about this, sort of taking you through step by step what we've been doing. And we're very keen for this code, which is in the open. So everything we've done is open source and is Apache licensed. But currently it's being done as a project that's been in part sponsored by our friends at Citi. But we wanted to actually contribute it back to the Cloud Foundry community through the Cloud Foundry community organization within GitHub. We feel that's really where this belongs and where we think people will get the most value out of the work we've been doing. And obviously, we're looking for input from other people as we develop it further.
Yeah, I do think we should thank our friends at Citi who have been helping to promote, subsidize this. We got a big joint project there together, and also one of the major CTOs from Citi. I won't break the news too much, but he's going to be the opening chair of the Cloud Foundry working group for Wall Street that's coming out next week.
Wow.
So they've been big supporters, and I'm actually in Jacksonville, Florida, to visit some of their technical folks tomorrow. So they've been a huge part of our story together. So thank you to the Citi.
So maybe if I can pass to Alex, and Alex, I don't know if you've got you can share your screen and perhaps walk through some of the detail. I mean, I don't think we have time to do a full demo or anything now, but just to give you a flavor of what we've been doing, if that's okay.
No worries. I mean, I think our buddy Alan Beck wrote me after last week's show because I was opining on this God layer concept that Cloud Foundry actually aims to do a discrete set of things exceptionally well, as opposed to always describing the universe of all possible things. And therefore, it's really important for us to have partners that can extend from there and help do more than that and syndicate more than that into our framework, or else I don't think we're going to be as successful as it could be. So this is, I think, great news.
Excellent.
Yes.
Alex, can you hear us? Foiled by Vegas Wi-Fi?
We could hear him before, and he's got enough bandwidth to stream our pictures.
Huh. Give him 1 minute.
Well, what we could do is we could just swap. You can grab my laptop if that's easier. Alex? We're in the same room, basically, so...
I love this MGM Grand thing behind you, like you're wanting a fight between two people, like you're Don King and you're taking a moment out to talk about enterprise architecture.
Well, I was literally sitting down having a beer with Angel, and I said, look, I'm sorry, I've got to run, but this guy Waters, he's giving me a hard time about this After Dark thing, so he sends his regards, as you'd expect.
Tell him he's welcome.
Tell Angel he's invited anytime.
Yeah.
Is audio working now? I can hear you. No, I can't. Never mind. I think I heard you through Duncan's.
The crack After Dark audio visual crew comes through once again.
We checked all the mics before this, right?
We've got a huge team working overtime.
It's all about the production values. Nothing but the finest for our audience.
Testing. How's this?
I can hear you.
Great. So this is me with Duncan's headphones going into his laptop but sharing my screen because Google decided my mic should not work today.
Well, unfortunately,
I'm going to pin it on your screen.
Rather than you, so why don't they drop off, and that way, I don't know, just use mine.
Well, if you click on me, can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. So this is the blog post basically describes how you can check out and use the code. The code is all here right now in the CloudSoft repo, but we want to move it over to the Cloud Foundry community. The idea is there's a service broker and a plugin. And with the service broker, it wires up Brooklyn. Apache Brooklyn is kind of a blueprinting management framework. So you can write blueprints in YAML, you can add them to a catalog, you can write them in Java or something else on the JVM. And pretty fancy catalog of things we've been building with the guys at MongoDB, with Basho, Couchbase, and so forth. So in raw Brooklyn, you can just kind of pick something, say next, say where you want to deploy it, and off you go. But with the Cloud Foundry plugin, it's actually you can drop a blueprint straight into your manifest. So what we've done is anything in the Brooklyn catalog, say a Mongo sharded deployment, I want 5 shards of 3 replica sets each, deployed onto localhost or deployed into Google Compute. And the plugin takes the job of moving the deployment and passing it to the service broker. And then the service broker, of course, passes it to Brooklyn, which will go and deploy it. And then once it's done, it will take all that and then do the usual kind of VCAP services environment variable. So all the sensors, wherever the Mongo nodes are running, will get passed into your app in the usual way. So that's a whistle-stop tour. It is kind of, we sort of just finished it and just released it. It's been something we've been working on for the last month and a half or so. So there's some rough edges, and we're looking for feedback how it can be made better. But I think, kind of coming back to the blog post, we think we've done it in a fairly idiomatic way. It's sort of the usual update service broker, create service, and then on the plugin side, it's Brooklyn push to push something to Brooklyn and then push it into Cloud Foundry once the application is live. Brooklyn sensors will read whatever sensors you want. So kind of one of the things the Apache Brooklyn will do is sit there and look after the process, attach policies for scaling things out or back or doing failover. And you can get access to all the sensors, the metrics that are driving that, and you can invoke the effectors, the operations that drive restarting things or scaling things out.
So Alex, you've jumped into the plugin. What about the plain vanilla service broker? Is there value in just starting with that?
Yeah,
Saba seemed to have a good time doing that on Friday.
Yeah, there's 2 parts to it. Duncan's reminding me. There's the service broker, which sets it up. If you've got an existing Brooklyn, you can just do things like create service and manage your services in the usual way, separate from the application. And so it just kind of takes the usual idioms which map one-on-one into the Brooklyn REST API. But the tedious thing is if you want to create a brand new service that's not in the catalog, you've got to go into Brooklyn, add it to the catalog, and then it immediately becomes available. So it's a pretty handy way if you've got to take the off-the-shelf catalog of 30 or so different components.
So just to digest that for people a little bit, there's enough essentially services metadata in Brooklyn already to auto-populate our services API. So essentially we've got data completeness between the two, and you just translate those fields into the Cloud Foundry API. So if you've made a Brooklyn service already, you probably have enough there to make it a Cloud Foundry service as well then?
Exactly. The Service Broker API was kind of just a one-on-one match to things that were already in the catalog.
Right.
Once something's in the catalog, we can create it, stop it, do a lot more things. And the Service Broker on its own lets you do all that, and that's kind of pretty easy to install. There's a WAR file that when we were with you, James, and with Saba earlier this week, he was able to take his Cloud Foundry instance, deploy the Service Broker as a WAR, connect it to his Brooklyn, and all the services in his catalog became available.
So to summarize, the Service Broker integration lets you start whatever services are in your Brooklyn catalog, and then the plugin that you showed first, but actually probably got developed second, is going the other direction.
Exactly.
Injecting in, metadata from the Cloud Foundry manifest into what gets instantiated in the Brooklyn side.
Exactly. So kind of here we've got the things in the catalog, but within Brooklyn you can go into the catalog, and if you've got some other blueprint, you can just drop the YAML right in and then make it available. But what we wanted to do to make it tighter was that if you've got some complex topology of Storm or whatnot, you can describe that directly in your application's manifest. And so the combination of the plugin and the Service Broker kind of give you nice, small modular pieces that working together kind of add up to letting you do things in what we think is a pretty idiomatic way. But you're the Cloud Foundry expert, so we're looking for your feedback on whether that's the natural idiom.
Yeah, and we did as much. I mean, it looked great to me. I liked the use of the plugin, and a lot of what people have asked us for is the ability to, in that manifest, describe everything that they want to come into existence for the app, maybe inside or outside of Cloud Foundry. So I think this takes a small step there, which is definitely a hot area for us to continue to advance on. Mike D, what do you think of this? You're here to talk .NET. I'm going to put you on the spot, though.
I mean, this seems super cool, right? This is the pattern we want everyone to follow for getting services into Cloud Foundry, right? I mean, this is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, so now I think what's cool is that we have this like network effect between each other, right? So everyone who's using Brooklyn gets the power of some Cloud Foundry goodness, and now Cloud Foundry leverages Brooklyn. And I'm also interested in, us being a resource, that you describe, like a very complex app that someone might want to use more than our manifest potentially. Have you guys thought a little bit about that side, and what is City really for?
Yeah, so they're looking at how are they going to manage the applications, which consist of things running within the Cloud Foundry ecosystem, and then other services that right now have to run totally outside of it. And I've been talking to Lewis Paul there about Diego, and I mean, one of the great things about that is that Diego becomes a valid target for us, so that we're used to running in Clocker, which is great for speed. We can do the same thing with Diego. All of our blueprints here, we should be able to stand up inside. We can cut Docker files and send them to Diego. So the nice thing there is you're managing everything within the same environment. One of the other pieces City are interested in, I haven't really talked about it much on this because it was about the integration, but the reason we keep these models in Apache Brooklyn is so that we can attach policies to look after it. And underneath it's an autonomic framework. So you have your failover policies attached to your data tier, and then there's just some simple scaling logic that we put in, and we're talking to Cloud Foundry to scale things out and back, but the drivers for that scaling, or maybe we're enabling caching if we're under heavy load but we're not making much money, all of that policy logic can sit as part of the blueprint. So kind of some of the places we'd like to take this are targeting Diego in V2 and putting in some policies in place so we can actually understand the deployments within Cloud Foundry itself. Duncan is sitting here agitating to talk, and since I've stolen his headset, I'm going to pass back to him. But thanks for the chance to present, and I look forward to catching up with some of you if you've tried it and got some feedback.
That's one thing. Never all talking on Cloud Foundry After Dark presenting. That's all. Just other than that, totally awesome. Thank you. We'll save that for meetings.
So basically, this is the only way to shut me up, is steal my headset. Listen, I hope this was a useful introduction, and I guess we're very keen for people to actually start playing with this. I think the round trip of using the two together does actually make a lot of sense, although clearly one then has to look at, from a business point of view, who do you give this kind of power to, which is obviously a topic for another day.
Yeah, give me a little bit more flavor on that, though, Duncan. What exactly? Where's your concern there?
It's not so much a concern as a separation of concerns. I mean, you'll want developers to have access to perhaps a set of predefined services, but you also want other people that might be more in the DevOps kind of idiom to develop new services. And I don't necessarily see, certainly in an enterprise, they're necessarily one and the same person. That's really all I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew talks about this a lot. We somewhat separate, like, hey, here's the DevOps or operator layer that they create services that developers consume.
Right.
And we're not trying to get completely into cowboy coding where you can just create any service you want with a little manifest and hope for the best. But I do think if you guys have an excellent Mongo service, for instance, which we haven't delivered a production Mongo service yet, and I know Philips Medical wants it, maybe that's a quick way of like, okay, here you go. These people spend a lot of time thinking about Mongo. They've got the right policies for it versus waiting for us to do it to completion ourselves.
Completely agree. And I think we've curated a number of those services that we'd love to make available. And then the question is how? I mean, it's Apache Brooklyn, therefore there's an awful lot that's already in the open source world that can be tapped into, with or without our blessing. I mean, it's just there. But I think, a more managed approach is clearly going to matter in some of the larger accounts. I'm sounding like an old git, I know, but somebody has to worry about this stuff.
No, I mean, it starts to matter when you have thousands and thousands of developers working on projects, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's one of the things about Cloud Foundry's workflows and the orgs and spaces is you have some of that built into the framework. I'm curious how, as this evolves, where people see those, like what would you put in Brooklyn versus what would you put in Cloud Foundry, and then how does that shift over time, or does it?
We don't know the answer to that. I mean, I think there are a whole bunch of services that we can provide today that are actually a bridge to, in some cases, a more, if you like, legacy environment where there's no actual desire to sort of import everything into Cloud Foundry and at the same time give people the power of Cloud Foundry, as we're seeing, to sort of develop new apps. But those apps will ultimately need some back-end services. So if that's what we end up providing, robust production support for, then I think that's a win for everybody. I think giving people the ability to author new services without creating quote-unquote blueprint sprawl would I think also be attractive to some of the DevOps. So there's I think there's a fair amount of education and thinking to be done before this is fully baked. But right now we're very keen to push it into the Cloud Foundry community as it is, and have other people, play with it, give us their opinion, and so on. I'm going to hand the hands back to Alex to give him the last word. This never normally happens.
While you're doing that, Arnie, what do you think of this? You touch so many customers that are using this. What do you think? Do you think we're mad and we're relaxing our definition of service too much, or do you think this is the right extensibility? I do, but I'm just curious in your thoughts, Arnie.
Yeah, I mean, we've been, as you know, we've been spending a lot of time with clients, and as we make our Elastic runtime more and more robust with 1.4 coming out soon, the need for enterprise class services is still very high. We've had some clients who've done roll your own. We've done this in the past with a Docker service broker. I don't know if people have seen that in the past, what Ferdy has done. But I think Brooklyn's approach is an interesting way for our clients to expose some of the new services to the Elastic runtime. So it's an amazing new option. And I'm curious on what the big financial that we're speaking to has plans for as they roll out more production services, because that's the key. We want these services to be production grade and not just dev/test, and that's when it'll be really interesting. So this is great work. This is definitely impressive. Yeah, it's cool stuff.
Hey, thanks very much. Just kind of coming back, the way I see it is the benefit of Cloud Foundry is that it makes things simple by telling people this is a really good way to do things. And so people do it that way, and everything's automated, and they get the benefits of it. Where Apache Brooklyn comes in is where things have to be done a certain way. We have to do this messy bit here, and then this nasty bit there, and then talk this weird language up here. And so that's sort of it. It's been useful in going all the way. I mean, we're at Interconnect, so we probably have to give a shout out to WebSphere and DB2, but we can support those. If people get to choose, they might not want to, but a lot of people don't have that choice. Then going kind of all the way through at the other end, we've been doing work with the folks at Hortonworks. There's an Apache Ambari blueprint, and this is one of those where it doesn't fit the idiom of machines, because once we've got Ambari running, what's interesting is kind of what we're layering on top, all the ODP, HDP, Hadoop, Kafka, and so being able to make REST calls to provision that, stick that into your blueprint. I think time will tell what the right breakdown, what needs to sit where, but we need to kind of, it's great to be able to start that.
Yeah, the separation concerns that Duncan was speaking about will become really important, especially within the context of the enterprise, where there's well-defined roles and how those get blended as these tools can emerge. Cool.
Well, does Angel miss you? Is he going to be mad that I kept you guys for 20 minutes?
I think they'll be pleased when we go back in. Thanks for letting us join, and I'll say it's a lot easier to join at this time slot being on the West Coast than being over in Scotland where it's 4 a.m. But I will get up at...
So what you're saying is this is special also because I think it's the first time someone joined after dark wearing a jacket. So this is definitely that's a first. When Duncan joined a little while before. It's always been people in t-shirts and scary looking stuff, but yeah, jacket is pretty suave. Or that guy who's scaring us right now.
The most distinguished gentleman in the cloud.
I have his headphones, so he won't even know what you've said until he's watched it.
All right.
Hey, thanks, folks. It's been a pleasure joining in, and I'll talk to you again in a couple weeks, I hope.
No, awesome to see you, Alex. Thanks for the help.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I like partner integrations that are driven by mega customers. I always feels good. Like there's nothing speculative about it. That's what they wanted. It's what they get. It's great to do that.
I thought it was interesting to hear him articulate how you could have the dividing line is that we have this pure or more pure sort of cloud native approach, and then Brooklyn's like, okay, like let's just do this nasty stuff over here. And then we're connecting back together.
That's why we need their help. I mean, otherwise you go in and you're like, okay, well we'll handwrite service brokers for those things. But if Brooklyn can already describe them, that's a pretty nice step. So it definitely.
It also gives you a lot more manageability for the user on the other side.
Yeah, it's like a smarter service broker in some ways because it expects more entanglement.
.NET then?
I'd like to hear from Mike D. Mike D, how you doing? And first, you got to explain your Twitter handle and why your name is Flavor Jones.
It's not really that good of a story. Are you sure you want me to do it?
I'm just saying, like, it's kind of like one of the coolest Twitter handles. Like,
Um, all right. So I guess the 20-second version is when I was in college. I had a bunch of friends who were on a MUD, multi-user dungeon, right? So text adventure, precursor to massively multiplayer games, right? And they all had stupid handles like Pringle. And so when it came time for me to actually join this and hang out with them there, I picked a word randomly out of the dictionary. Like I literally opened the book, pointed to a page, and the word was flavor. So that was my handle for all of college. And when I actually got on the internet, flavor wasn't that unique, so I threw Jones on the end. There you go. Not a good story at all.
I mean, the rapping community certainly has adopted that word that you happen to pick out of the dictionary and force. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I retroactively looked pretty cool, right?
Yeah, yeah. I thought you might have been a rapper in New York Underground for a while when I first saw that handle.
No, furthest thing from the truth.
So why don't you tell folks what you do?
Sure. So I'm one of the engineering directors for Cloud Foundry at Pivotal. I'm based out of the New York office. A couple of the projects that I kind of cat herd through progress are the containerization projects for Windows mainly. Also, I dabble a little bit in the Linux side of things, as well as build packs and some of the toolsmiths, the CI tools that we're using, both in-house and with the foundation these days.
I think .NET's one of the more promising things that people want to see because it's still out there, right? It's I like to say it's 60-40 with Java, but it's still a very big 40 or 45.
Oh, it's more than that in New York. It's huge.
Yep. So they're waiting for hope, and there's been a lot of debate around the isolation that IIS provides, that maybe this job objects provide. They've made some announcements about more containerization stuff called Drawbridge that I don't think is going to actually see the light of day, from what I hear. What's the latest on how you guys are creating isolation between .NET apps with Diego?
Well, so the latest is that we've had a very fortunate experience working with CenturyLink, taking a lot of their experience with Iron Foundry and taking their container strategy and actually using that inside Diego, right? So the idea is that CenturyLink has a lot more experience than we do with .NET technologies, right? I think that Pivotal has generally not been a Windows stack heavy company. And so CenturyLink has been a great partner. Microsoft has reached out. They've been talking to us as well. So the net is we just open sourced our initial GitHub repos for Windows support this week, actually. CenturyLink has been amazing. Again, so the job objects. You asked about job objects. This is what CenturyLink has been using, and this appears to be what Microsoft wants to standardize on going forward as well. Drawbridge ends up being a little less performant, right, because you're sandboxing all these kernel calls, and so it looks like job objects are the way to go. Hopefully they will have some Windows Server 2016 bits available for us. We're going to get access to that at the same time as the Docker team is, and hopefully we will be able to make some serious progress on that over the next couple of months. What else can I tell you?
Hey, why don't you talk a little bit about the app lifecycle architecture? Because that's really, really cool what we've done with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I show slides? I realize that you're not supposed to show slides on After Dark.
No,
I won't show slides.
No, show slides. Just don't call it presenting.
Oh, okay. I won't present then. Let me share my screen real quick.
Over on the left side, the green thing.
Yep, I got it. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Awesome. So, where is it? So, Mark Kropp, who's the PM on the Windows support project, did this cool little blog post, and he announced that there are a couple of repos that we just open sourced. One of them is called the Windows App Lifecycle. Way to tee up, Abby. Thank you. So the idea is that a replacement for the DEA and the staging process and all that is going to be similar across Docker, Linux, and Windows. in that we're going to have these new things hanging out that are called the builder, the launcher, and the health watcher. And so we actually have in our repos, here you go, builder, launcher, and health check. Sorry. So we actually have .NET or Go versions of this that work for Windows now. These used to have much more clever names, but we are trying to get rid of clever names now and just trying to say what things actually are. Abby, anything specific you want me to talk about with the app life cycles?
I just wanted to talk about how it was architected and how this differs from some of the other attempts to really isolate .NET processes, because I think what we've done is really, really cool. And I think the outcomes of this as we build in more of the integration tighter with Bosch and the automation capabilities is going to be phenomenal.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to turn off my screen share real quick. So the builder on .NET is actually kind of a no-op, right? We just take the application bits. There's no build packs. So we just take the application bits, we basically tarball it up and call it a droplet. That all runs inside the containerizer. That's mostly the CenturyLink code. And this is what actually provides all that process isolation. The job object doesn't do a perfect job. The Windows kernel doesn't allow us to do a perfect job of process isolation. Right now, pretty much all it does is watch memory usage limits. There's a promise there for being able to also limit CPU usage, etc.
If you put a Bitcoin mining app on this, it's not going to end well.
Yeah, or if you fork bomb accidentally or intentionally, it's not going to end well either, which makes it not great for multi-tenant systems, right? But for the time being, we're not planning to have tight Bosch integration, at least not until we understand the use cases a little bit better. How are customers actually going to be deploying this in the wild? How do they want to manage their Microsoft licensing schemes, etc.?
Do you think we should watch runaway processes, and is there any way hey, we don't provide inline isolation, but should we watch for, hey, if you want an option to consume X, you're consistently out of control, I'm going to kill you?
Oh yeah, I think that's definitely going to be on the roadmap before we do something serious with this. I think we're going to need to. I don't think it's reasonable I don't think it's reasonable not to provide some kind of safeguards there.
Go ahead, Shafe. Sorry,
I was just going to say, I guess there's two big questions to me. One is, as this moves into enterprise production environments, what's the expectation we're setting with the customer, with respect to how they should think about, we have maybe the same or different expectations with the Linux side about multi-tenancy and how you're going to do these things and what you can expect with your workforce org spaces and colliding with each other. And this is probably more philosophical, but I'm curious why the drawbridge approach is so much slower or not performant. I don't know. It's probably not appropriate for this hangout, but that when I hear what some of the, and I'm sure you guys had some of these conversations and Jambase had these conversations. I'm just curious why the isolation at the kernel level in Linux is so much better than what we're able to get out of Windows right now.
Great questions. I'll try to address them in reverse order. So drawbridge ends up being, I guess, a little bit slower simply because there's a lot of layers of sandboxing that have to go on. Drawbridge ends up having a whitelist of safe calls that are okay to be made from within this sandboxed environment. And it just sounds right now they haven't really figured out a good strategy for doing that in a performant way, right? So that they don't break backwards compatibilities and have all these apps that used to work no longer work. That's just a really hard problem. And I think Microsoft's invested a lot of time in drawbridge, and the fact that they're now, it sounds to me like backing away from that in favor of just having job objects with a little more traditional quota systems indicates to me that maybe they're looking for a little more language level support than they are kernel level support.
I mean, I saw some of the emails that got exchanged and some of the stuff Microsoft people said, where they're basically like, hey, we just, we spent all this time trying to make this work, and now we're giving up, basically.
Yeah, it's what it sounds like. We were very excited about drawbridge. We thought it was probably, it promises to be a superior solution, but if you can't make it performant, it's not really superior, right? But then your first question, right, was how are we setting expectations? So I think that the short version is that if they have apps today running on Windows machines, right, it's going to be very similar performance characteristics. They're going to get a lot of the scalability pros of having a PaaS. But the same lack of process isolation that they have today, right? It's just they're getting a little bit more than they do today.
It's not going to be worse than what they're running right now. Basically.
Right. It's guaranteed to not be worse. It's going to be better in many ways. And process isolation, or at least enforcing some kind of quota systems, is going to be part of that better. But it's not going to be a perfect process isolation until Microsoft really releases this new version of Server 2016 with all the job object goodness. And even then, it probably won't be perfect, but it'll be good enough to get by.
Yeah, and I talked to I had dinner Friday night with a major online trading firm, I think retail trading brokerage, and they are heavily .NET. And I was talking about job objects and how they're working for them. They went from IIS to job object isolation, even as it exists today. And he said for well-known apps, like not random apps from strangers on the internet, this tended to work pretty well as basic isolation for them as a first step. So I'm actually pretty excited about this as a first step. And I think you just have to be smart about not having poorly understood applications that don't have a behavior you're used to, just throwing them on here in a multi-tenant environment.
It just means you're going to end up, or that you by necessity you have to push more of it back into your process, culture, and kind of general hygiene of your org.
Yeah. Whereas on Linux containers, we survived Gandidos, who was the Bitcoin miner that attacked us all last summer, just trying to Bitcoin us and totally try to take every ounce of resource from every DEA that he or she ran an app on. So I think Gandidos would destroy Microsoft job objects. I hope he or she is not listening to this podcast at this time.
That's why I think it's probably not reasonable to set some kind of CPU trip limit. We're going to have to.
That's pretty cool, Mike. I think you're going to have a huge demand for people and features on this. And it's open source. So this is one of the only, there's a couple guys that screw around in the .NET PaaS space, but no one in an open source in anger way with a big major R&D team like you got.
Yeah, well, and the plus side of this, right, is that one of the other major players, CenturyLink, they've been running Iron Foundry for a long time. If people are comfortable with Iron Foundry and their apps run there, 99.999% guaranteed it's going to work well within this new Garden Windows backend on Diego.
Yeah, one thing to add there is I think Q3 and Q4 of last year we had one Fortune 100 client who was tempted to look at some of the .NET or the Windows-friendly passes, but just looked at Cloud Foundry and was just blown away by the architecture and vision. They work through Iron Foundry, and with a little help, and Brian Button, huge shout out if you're listening, man. Phenomenal work from the Iron Foundry team. They were able to run a bunch of fairly big apps on CF, and I'm just posting one link. Hopefully people can see it. But the back end of the R&D team for that Fortune 100 firm did a podcast for around 50 minutes. You can listen to half of it or all of it, depending on how much interest you have. But they speak about their experience with Cloud Foundry, including .NET. I won't reveal the name. It's a tease. The name is mentioned in the podcast, so go and listen to it. But it's a pretty impressive feat of all things Cloud Foundry, Java, PHP, Go, .NET, all within that enterprise. And Iron Foundry just came through for them, and they're really looking forward to what Mike D and team have been pushing through, and they're going to go live fairly shortly. So great story there.
Awesome. And before we move on, I just want to give a shout out to Brandon Jones and Chris Sterling from CenturyLink for all the hard work they put in making their containerization replaceable inside Diego. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, and I want to shout out my buddy Jared Ray, who honestly this whole conversation started in, say, 2010. He visited, we told him, maybe it was 2011, he visited, and we said, he's like, hey, I want to be part of the Cloud Foundry ecosystem. And I'm like, well, you're up in Seattle and you know Microsoft really well. Why don't you help us do .NET extensions? And he didn't give up until, as Brian McLean tweeted, it was a crazy ride until we got it fully into production, but here it comes.
I also pasted the Iron Foundry link for people who are not familiar with it. Just log in, takes 5 minutes, The cool thing is, to Abby's point, CF push. That's all you got to do. Nothing changes.
Well, you got to have some .NET code to push. So that's
Oh well. Oh well. The guess is the point is, yeah, you probably, yeah, you're probably there already.
So what's next, Dekel? You wanted to talk about some stuff? We're gonna get our other guy in. He's trying to.
I miss the old After Darks when it was just Josh and Andrew and me arguing about something minute. We have too much content going on in the ecosystem right now. There's too much news to tell. We can't just argue.
We can find minutia to argue about.
No, it's good. Dekel, you wanna? The people don't know Dekel. Dekel, you want to introduce yourself? You've been doing this longer than me by a couple months.
Sure. Yeah, I run with my customer engagements. So I go and talk to people who are trying to do things with Pivotal CF essentially. And I just wanted to tell a short story from this week, which was pretty interesting. In a large, we did a large presentation to a travel hosting company, and the funny thing, and I always see this when the power of Cloud Foundry as being kind of both for developers and operators, is the internal discussions when you go into a room and the developers you're asking them how long does it take you to provision something, right? And they're telling you months, and then you're asking them, but how long does it take you to get a VM? The operational team are kind of saying, hey, we're giving you a virtual machine in 2 minutes. Why does it take you so long to provision an app? And then there is a fascinating discussion about the difference between just getting a VM up and running and actually getting an application. And it's over and over again when you're seeing the kind of the tension between the developers and the operators, and how Cloud Foundry can actually kind of bring them together. And this was all open source Cloud Foundry, right? This was a specific prospect that is starting to looking at commercial solutions that was adopting open source. And to me, it's it. And I'd love to hear other folks here. Like, do they see the same thing? It's like because a lot of people, when you talk to PaaS, they think developers. And to me, the operational aspect here is so much more impressive, and how actually it reduces. These guys are like 7 months to get an app out the door, and they're trying to compete with companies that are doing this in hours or days. And when we showed them the Ops Manager demo, it was like, hey, this is like thousands of lines of scripting that are being automated. The thing that I find interesting is like how much of this is about process change as much as technology change. And I've seen this like this week in particular was fascinating to see those kind of internal discussions, and how kind of an offering like CF changes the dynamics. So I just wanted to kind of see if people see the same thing, if it's something that we are interested in, you find it kind of exciting. To me, this is it's almost like you're dealing with change more than you're dealing with technology. So it's pretty cool.
I thought that we had our whatever internal meeting all last week, and that one panel with a bunch of customers, I think all of them are Fortune 100, were focused on culture and how much it changes their cultural. It's not just tech; it's all about the culture. Each one of them said it over and over for half an hour.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, the technology represents the choices that the culture makes and the values. So going for extreme automation with constraint is a big cultural leap for people who tended to buy on extreme number of features with, best effort human automation. Those are two completely different kind of mindsets.
it's yeah, I totally agree, and I think the
I got to smile on that one. There's this person lurking in the dark that at least gave a smile.
It's more like a split.
it's like, to me, obviously, I can't mention the specific company name, but like when the CIO is kind of telling you keep pushing, so after you have all these internal debates, he's telling you afterwards, hey guys, keep pushing. We need this change. That, to me, that's something, and I've something, just a product, right? It's like you really help these companies reinvent themselves, and it's a cultural change, and I find it, even because it's you're dealing with humans, how they view. Some of them are threatened, right? Some of them are think, hey, are you taking away our job? Haven't seen a single to explain the product where it still remains the main argument and have more contribution to the business. So objection, but
Is Deckel breaking up?
He's breaking up a little bit, but I get his message, and that it's interesting. One of the things that people ask is like, "Hey, what's the ROI?" And I say, "Well, the ROI is as big as you have the cultural bravery to accept," which is different than a lot of tools that try to do your message for less, so they don't ask you to change, but then they have minimal ROI. Ours is very different.
How big is that hunger in your belly? The fire in your eyes?
It's a lifestyle.
It's a lifestyle.
I switched mics. Hopefully it's better. My cats are making a lot of noise here, so I had to lower the microphone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it sounds great.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So yeah, I think James mentioned that it's like the innovate or die versus same as for less, and it's anything that it's the same pattern. Doesn't matter which vertical you're talking to, which customer. It's kind of all of them are kind of in the same boat, and it's more and more around. Let's not try and just squeeze some cost saving, but let's really try to change, because otherwise we're just going to be driven out of business, and a lot of it is cultural change.
We lost Deckel.
Really?
Okay, I can hear you now. But you're in now, buddy. But we hear your message loud and clear. I just, so people know, like, almost no one talks to more companies in their first couple conversations around this kind of thing than Deckel. So, and he has a pretty wicked streak going on the people he talks to.
How many meetings do you have this week coming up, Deckel?
Oh man.
Well, this week is I have 5 customers, and the next 2 weeks I'm going to be in Singapore, Hong Kong, Shenzhen, and Beijing. So we're doing a tour in APJ, and China is huge. China is just unbelievable.
And Melissa and her guys are going to stack every day with a full schedule while you're there, right? So.
Yeah. They're keeping me very busy. But
you'll get off the plane and they'll give you the paper with your printed itinerary for every hour till you leave.
Yeah, but it's really fun. I mean, talking to customers at those early stages where they are ripe for the strategic influence. Kind of how I'd like to think about it. That they listen and they really looking for a way to change is awesome. And I try not to talk about the product until very late in the meeting. So it's first of all about how we help you solve a problem and not what the product does, because I know a lot of time we start sales pitches with just here is the product, and we forget about the customer and what problem we're actually trying to solve. And you know, to me, it's a lot of fun.
I don't think those people are on this hangout.
Well, maybe if they're watching, then maybe we'll this with the stop death by PowerPoint. We'll try to affect.
So what else we have? I was hoping Ramiro was going to jump in, but it seems like he's having technical difficulties. Got anything interesting, Arnie? Well, we just spent an internal week where at least, I don't know, I thought there was a lot of Cloud Foundry talk from a Pivotal perspective. It was kind of crazy to see the field that represents Pivotal get excited about this technology.
Yeah, and everyone was pumped up because you pulled no punches in your session. So they were like excited about the straight talk. Andrew expressed it. Let's just say we've had a very distinctively not corporate effect on the company between the two of us.
I was asked to be bold.
Be bold with the
Yeah, he did bring the Gatling guns. When you can start and end your presentation with Gatling guns, then surely it must be bold, right?
That's the thing. Anytime Schaefer speaks, the market for Gatling guns just goes up. You should see the online demand for it just go like that.
Now I should probably get one.
You don't have one? I thought you had.
No, I think
I got Gatling gun right here.
Yeah, I think speaking to a bunch of people late nights during kickoff, for people who are not familiar with what we're speaking of or not following us on Twitter, we had a Pivotal sales kickoff like most enterprise software firms. It's that one-a-year fun event that happens during the day and craziness that happens late evenings. But there's a lot of excitement on. There's a ton of excitement around the messaging coming out of Cloud Foundry, the momentum we've had in 2014, and a lot of exciting stuff. The roadmap that was presented. The field generally walked away with some unbelievable boost as they walked out. So it's pretty cool. I wish I could share everything, but for the most part, they just walked away with amazing stuff. It's pretty cool.
What I also learned this week is that the majority of Pivotal's field watches Cloud Foundry after dark, or at least the
funniest thing that happened the entire week. Bro came up to me. He's like, "Hey, I see a lot on After Dark. You're skinnier on TV."
Yeah.
I needed to drop a few donuts, so I have a good sense of humor about it. So I just laughed at his late night drinking honesty about that.
It's the camera takes off a few pounds, right? Something like that.
I think you just see in my head. You don't see that I got chubby in the middle in the current view, so it's all good. I did it doing what I love, which is having too many customer dinners all year, and we set a record for revenue. So I'll take it for 1 year.
Yeah, and how cool was it to have clients come in and speak about the transformation they're doing with Cloud Foundry? I mean, sit on stage, walk through the vision. Some of them starting, some of them deep into it. Some of them have made a big step on completing phase 1. I thought that was the most exciting part of kickoff, which is not just us speaking about what we do, but clients coming back to us and saying, what's the cool stuff that we're helping them with? And this is not, no offense to sysadmins and devs, right? I mean, they're obviously extremely important, but these are senior execs whose jobs are on the line based on their adoption of this technology, and they're transforming an entire business. And some of these businesses are 90 years old, so again, it's pretty humbling, pretty awesome.
Yeah, I thought that was really inspirational too. I talked about it with the rest of the New York office leadership, and we're going to try to get footage of that and make the whole office watch it.
Yeah,
that's the kind of thing that really will keep people going through tough client engagements, tough setups, tough everything. So I totally agree.
Which session are you trying to get?
This is the client panel
The
that
panel
they talked about.
with Bill Cook.
Yeah, Bill, and then Leo. I mean, speaking of client-focused firms, I mean, how cool is it that one of our clients is a Scottish dude, and he really wanted to wear a kilt for the session, and our SVP of Corp Dev walked up wearing a kilt. He's a shortish Jewish guy. He looked funny as hell, but just showed the culture, at least one small culture of the company, where a client walks in with something and we reciprocated by wearing a kilt. Dude, I wouldn't have pulled it off. I'm amazed that Leo pulled it off. That was funny.
Yeah, I think, when we started last year, it was our first year out with the product, so we did a lot of the talking to the field about what it was.
Yeah.
And this year, to have all the customers come in and talk about what it meant to them, it took it and made it kind of like a movement, as opposed to just like, hey, here's some product slides that you can talk about.
Yeah.
So that was pretty special.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So Carlos just asked a question in the chat about ISVs and then companies that support or develop apps for Cloud Foundry. And I'd just say that anyone I know who's doing sort of Cloud Foundry related work, support work, they seem to have pretty full schedule. And I think that the ISV question remains to be seen, but I personally think that we'll see a development of, as this platform becomes more and more of a standard, then why wouldn't you build to run your apps on that thing instead of, I think you'll see a transition where, oh yeah, we're enabling a lot of iteration and rapid development, but the operational aspects that Dekel was just mentioning would apply to anyone running anything. So as you start to get those ISV solutions architected for the platform, then why wouldn't you just drop them in? And what we're essentially enabling is on-demand, on-premise SaaS, software as a service behind your firewall. I think that will happen.
Yeah, and one thing I certainly want to add is, unlike some of the other passes out there that have, lock-in proprietary APIs, you follow best practices. And a 12-factor app is one start, but you pick your best practices, you build your app. That it naturally is going to land on CF. There's nothing special you need to do, right? So that comment around support and build apps for CF is nothing special. It's a best practices platform. It helps you adopt those best practices. So build away and just use CF as a target.
Yeah, and I'd like to add something also. When I talk to customers, one of the things they are really concerned about is the number of the inconsistency that they have in their data center across, so many vendors, so many companies. So if you start a company today and you want to sell in the future to those enterprises, there is a good chance you'll be asked, are you according to the standards that we work here? And those standards can be CF. So it's starting to be this kind of, hey, we want to consolidate and make things consistent, so don't bring us something that is inconsistent and does not apply with the kind of standards that we have here. So I think in the future, hopefully not distant future, you will see similar that you've been asked, hey, is this open source? You'll be asked, is this being run in a consistent standard way? And CF could be that. So I think as an ISV, it's something to think about, because you'll get asked those questions when you go and try and sell your solution.
And just not to put too fine a point on it, but we started the show with an ISV, Duncan and CloudSoft from Scotland. And Duncan relayed that they've been paid by Citigroup, which is a top 5 in the World Bank, to adapt CloudSoft for Cloud Foundry in a paid project and a major build-out. So I think access to clients like that is a huge, huge value. Although, to be fair, Duncan brings many years of experience in that market segment. So ISVs also need to pick where they have experience and what problems they can really help solve and where they have relationships, as much as they're just picking Cloud Foundry, I'd say. But for the people that do it right, it's been a great ride.
The ride's just starting.
Yeah, it's just getting started.
So, go ahead, Dekel.
No, I'm saying, and as an ISV, you can bring your solutions to market much faster because you don't have to invest in all the plumbing. So.
this is
specifically
a much
SaaS
longer
entities.
topic, but I was thinking about how Cloud Foundry or platforms like Cloud Foundry basically get rid of what have euphemistically been called iteration zero in certain agile approaches. Like you don't need iteration zero. You just push your first test.
Yep.
Well, it's midnight here in Jacksonville, and I gotta be up. I gotta be up pretty early to go talk to some folks. So I might suggest we call this one a little early, Schaefer. It's been pretty action packed.
I think an hour is not early.
Does anyone want the last word? Does anyone have anything sparkly, interesting? Abby?
What about the Dark Knight over there next to Abby?
I think the Dark Knight should have the last word.
No, he does not want the last word. He's good. We will have big hiring news this week. We'll be coming out with that. That'll be fun. So we'll drop some secrets then. And I'm just blown away about how many people emailed me about the last couple episodes. So we'll see if that pace continues or if it just reverts back to being our beer chats. I'm comfortable with either.
Well, the blog's going to be coming out this week with the link to the .NET open repo too, so people can go check that out.
Thank you, Abby.
Cool.
We didn't have any other secrets, Waters. One last secret, then we'll go. Do you have any secrets?
One last secret. Well, I actually already leaked it, which is that there is a Wall Street working group starting this week for Cloud Foundry that is kind of a little bit on the down low, and we're lucky enough to have some big time people chairing it.
It's technically called the Financial Services Working Group.
Pardon me. Thank you. The FS Working Group for
Because-
CF.
Because Kim Marie got upset when you said that before. It's like, you know how she is.
Like some Midtown people are all upset. They're like, "Yo, we're not on Wall Street, dog. Midtown is legit."
So this is going to be too awesome to fail.
New Jersey, right across this.
Pretty full in the house. Mike's laughing. He's a low.
So we have some hires coming up, and we're really close to having another hire. Let's say.
We got some hires. We got a hire coming up this week that I think is a very talented individual. I think will be great in the mix, and bring a lot to the table. And then we are also working on another one that will be, I think, very useful to the community and another good show of faith to people joining our mission. Stay tuned.
It fills some gaps in the story. It's going to be great.
I mean, I think the point is that people, like technologists, can go get good jobs anywhere. So where they choose to work is voting with their feet in a really important way, and that sends a big message to the market. I really like the momentum we've got on that metric. I don't know how you're feeling about recruiting in New York, Mike, if it's getting any easier now that Cloud Foundry gets more famous.
It is getting a little bit easier, but I will take the opportunity to make a pitch. If anybody out there wants to work on .NET or low-level system stuff in New York on Cloud Foundry in Go or C#, tweet me maybe. It would be great. I would love to meet you.
He has a cool handle. It is Flavor Jones, and he is fun to drink with. I can promise you that.
It doesn't have to actually be in New York. We'll hire you other places. You can tweet at all of us.
I myself live in the beautiful state of New Jersey, so it can happen.
True story. So I think we'll call that an after dark. Get back to work. It is after midnight on a Sunday, so there's plenty to do.
Back to work. Good night, everybody.
Cool.